So that's from our mutual friend, Syed Balki. When he goes, let's say he goes to a hotel, for example, right? There's the initial discount, but he's Eric. There's actually a second discount. So always go for the second discount if you can find it.
Oh, if I have a pooping unicorn rainbow that poops ice cream with sprinkles, it'll sell a ton of these squatty potties. Those ideas are so off the wall. They're a big hit or miss. And for as many hits there are, there's many more misses.
You can do all the learning in the world. You can talk to all the people. You can read. You can listen to all the podcasts. You can do all these things. If you're not out there experimenting, you're just not going to learn. All right. So Threads just lost half of its early users. So I think the number was they got up to 100 million or so. And they're saying that maybe only 50 million or so are sticking around. That's the headline number that I'm seeing. Have you heard something similar?
I haven't seen any data on how many Thread users are sticking around, but I know a lot of people have stopped using Threads that were super engaged in the first week.
Yep. So I think, what do you think are some of the lessons here? You can go first and then I'll go.
Just because something is hot and everyone's talking about it doesn't mean it's going to permanently stay that way. Another thing too is in marketing, what people don't really comprehend is when you're used to something and consumers are used to something, it's hard to change your perception. For example, people are used to going on Twitter to post similar types of messages that they would post on Threads. It's hard to just get them to switch and just be like all of a sudden, hey, you no longer need to post on Twitter, or you can do both. We tend to get stuck in our ways. And another great example of this is Google. There's been a lot of studies that show that Bing search results are more relevant than Google, but as consumers, we're used to just going to Google and searching and we're happy with it. Is Bing better or not? That's debatable, but people are satisfied with what they're getting at Google, so they don't really care to switch.
So here's how I look at it too. When I think about email marketing, your objective as an email marketer is really, sure, it's to convert, but ultimately you want to retain, which means you want them to get to look forward to the next email, which means you need to write a good email address, or not a good email address, a good email newsletter. And so when I think about Threads, what I liked about it initially was that it was very bare bones, which was the plus. But the minus also is that it's very bare bones. And so then what is the incentive to come back when maybe a lot of the people that are established on Twitter are already getting great engagement? So the natural writers are already there. And then the people that were testing out Threads, it was like the new and novel thing. But at the end of the day, you can see it really started to fizzle out for the people that are not natively used to writing. And so people are used to what they're used to. And people also, it's hard to change behaviors as well. And so do I think Threads will fail? No, I think it's still very much an and type of equation. So it's Threads and it's not even Twitter anymore. It's Threads and X, right? And I would just say that. And then the other thing is you can't count Meta out because they had a small strike team that was working on this. They're going to put more resources towards this. 50 million is still a significant number. It might decline a little more. But I do believe that they're going to improve the product and they're going to collect user feedback. They're going to look at what's good and they're just going to improve the product over time. And you've seen they've been pretty good at copying over the years, whether it's adding stories, whether it's adding reels, and now in this case, adding threads. So I wouldn't count them out. I think they still have one of the best teams in the world. So that's all it is at the end of the day. So it's not a knockout punch for Threads, but this is also a lesson for you in terms of if you're going to build something, just keep in mind, just because you get a lot of people in the beginning, you also have to be able to retain the users as well. And that means a lot of customer development. That means a lot of looking at the data to see what works and what doesn't, and constantly iterating.
Yeah. And what you should do if you're trying to get the most out of it as a marketer, don't worry if people are using Threads or not. Use all platforms. You can use similar messages to what you use on Twitter on Threads. Just post in multiple places. Doesn't take that much more time. If you get extra play, great. If not, no worries. Something extra is better than nothing.
So the other thing I'll say is I still like posting the threads to test concepts because maybe it's a psychological thing. It is a psychological thing for me, but I don't feel as much judgment when I post the threads. And so I'm just going to go post the threads first, see how it does. And then that's where I might consider posting the other channels. So you might look at it that way as well. That might be a little psychological hack for you. But I find that I tend to not be as filtered, which can be a good or bad thing when I'm posting the thread. So just keep that part in mind. But again, we're still in the very early innings right now. I would say we're not even through the first inning right now for threads. So just be patient with it. A lot of people like to use these headline numbers and it is what it is. All right. So inflation has cooled a little bit, but rates have gone up. And we're going to talk about what that means for marketing. But Neil, you're better with remembering numbers. Do you remember what the recent numbers are?
It's around 4% the last time I checked CNBC.
4.1%.
4 and change, I think. I don't know what the exact number was.
And then
But
rates
it was
are
the lowest since 2021.
the rates at 5.25% now, correct?
It's usually a range. So it's like, I don't know what the exact rate is, but it would be like 5.25 to
Or the Fed
5.5.
funds rate.
Yeah, the Fed's funds rate is typically a range. So it would be, I don't know what the rate is, but if it was 5.25, it would be somewhere around like 5.25 to 5.5.
Okay. So for those of you that don't really follow this stuff, we want to bring this up because all interest rates affect the entire economy, which in effect affects marketing at the end of the day. And we gave our predictions maybe, I don't know, 10-ish episodes ago or so. I still think it's a 50-50 chance of recession, but we're not here to predict the economy. We're more so here to talk about what this means for marketing. My take on this is that I think at least for the next quarter or two, at minimum, people are still going to be a little, call it a little gun shy when it comes to marketing, advertising in general. What Neil and I have reported is that our sales cycles are longer. So what used to be maybe a 30 to 45-day sales cycle, at least on the ad agency side, is now maybe anywhere from 4 to 6 month sales cycle. So it's not like people are saying no. It's more so they're tiptoeing around and waiting to see what happens with the economy. I think at least this increased rates are going to continue on for the next maybe year or two at minimum, if not more. And I think people are being cautious. They're being more efficient, which I think is a net win for the long term.
Yeah, and you're right. 4.1 according to CNBC. And then I started looking at details. So that brings the benchmark borrowing rate range from 5.25 to 5.5. Yeah, rates are going up. They're probably going to increase it another 0.25% summertime this year. And their plan is working. It's causing inflation to slowly go down, slowly or fast. It depends how you actually want to look at it. And the way I see it from a marketing perspective is put a lot of pressure on marketing. A lot of people have cut back. With GDP growing, a lot of companies are having confidence again. And we're starting to see companies starting to move forward with marketing projects, marketing spend. And if this continually happens, you're going to see more competition. Google and Facebook's earnings weren't bad. They both saw sentiment starting to come back when it comes to advertising. And this is going to cause marketing becoming more competitive for anyone pretty much listening, just because more people are going to be willing to spend.
Facebook did their quarterlies recently. I think Google reported as well, and they all crushed it, right? I don't know what the numbers are, but I also, speaking of GDP, I think so. GDP increased at an annual rate of 2.4% in the second quarter of 2023. And it was in 2022 where it went down for 2 quarters. But I think it's not an official recession, quote unquote, until it's 3, I believe. I could be wrong there. Fact of the matter is, what does this mean for you? Again, like, this stuff you can't really control, but what you can control is just to be aware of how people are approaching marketing right now. And in the next couple episodes, we'll talk about who's offering discounts and things like that as well.
Yeah, and what you should end up doing is whether rates go up or down, if your marketing is positive and you can generate ROI, continually double down. Don't stop. If you can't make your economics work, whether rates go higher or lower, doesn't matter. Move on and try a different marketing tactic.
Yep. And the other thing too is, if you know that a lot of these platforms are already offering these discounts and you're already hitting good numbers, you should try to reach out to them and see if you can get a second discount. And so that's from our mutual friend Syed Balki. And his thing always is like, let's say he goes to a hotel, for example, right? There's the initial discount, but he's Eric. There's actually a second discount. So always go for the second discount if you can find it. And it is what it is. So don't be afraid to ask. It's free to ask. And let us know how it works out for you. Let us know how the second discount works out for you. We're keen to know. All right, we're going to talk about if zero-click marketing is the future. But first and foremost, I just want to say in the last 3 episodes, before we started recording today, or actually after the last 3 sessions, hey, Neil, what's wrong with you? Are you sick? And he's like, yeah. I was like, yeah, I have a fever. So FYI, everyone, let this be known that Neil's powering through. He's recording with a fever right now, and we appreciate it, obviously. But I'm going to call him Len, Low Energy Neil. And I'm going to bring the energy, so we can call me High Energy Eric, and we're going to push through this. So
On a side note, it's really funny having a fever when it's 109 degrees outside.
But your fever is lower than it still. Otherwise, you'd be dead.
My fever is lower than the temperature outside, yes.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen over here, and then we can talk through this. I get to talk more because Neil's low energy, so that's cool. So this is written by Rand Fishkin, July 28th, 2023. This is more of a recap on this concept of zero-click marketing. And so at the highlight over here, he says, look, remember back in the day when Facebook posts click-through rates were 10%? That meant a full 15%. Neil's nodding his head because he spent a lot of money buying likes for his page, and his organic engagement was great until it wasn't. And then today, 1.5% is considered a miracle, and 0.15% is still a multiple of the median engagement rate, never mind CTR. So the whole point here is that if you're a platform like LinkedIn or Facebook or Snap or Instagram or Threads or X, whatever it is exactly, you're incentivized to keep people on the platform, because the more longer people are on the platform, they're reading more content there. You're going to be able to serve more ads, which means you make more money. So you're naturally incentivized to do that. And so back in the day, Facebook was good about sending organic traffic to, I don't know if you remember those sites, those clickbait sites like Worthy, not Upworthy. What was it called? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Upworthy's one of them. BuzzFeed was another one.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well,
Upworthy did really well from social. It grew super fast until their algorithms changed, and then they got crushed.
exactly. So one, you can't build, so that they took that away once the Facebooks of the world realized that, hey, maybe we should take the engagement for ourselves. And so I want you to take a look at this table over here. Those of you that can't see it, I'm going to describe it in a second, and then we can talk through what this actually means. So it says zero-click content on major web platforms. So it shows the platforms like Google, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, right? And then it shows allows out clicks in content, meaning that you can link to the outside, right? But it also has another column here that says algo prioritizes native content, and it says yes, exclusively no. And so here's what I want to say to you. On Instagram, for example, if you're posting native content, the algorithm is going to prioritize your content, right? Same thing with Twitter, same thing with YouTube, same thing with LinkedIn. It's really the big platforms right now, right? And it says creators benefit from a zero-click approach, meaning that they really don't want you to link out because it's going to get people to click off the platform. So you can see for the vast majority of these, besides Pinterest or Quora, basically everything else, if you're posting natively to the platform without linking out, you are going to get the benefit there. And so the argument from Rand Fishkin here, so he has a company called SparkToro, he founded a company called Moz, but his whole argument here is that the future of marketing is zero click, meaning that you're just going to have to learn to post natively to these platforms and get people to get really interested about who you are outside and get them to naturally Google. So really what that means is your marketing is just going to have to get better and better.
Yeah, and then the way I see it with marketing is even if you get zero clicks, that's okay. You can use it for brand building. Like there's just so much brand building that you can get from simple things like just being there whenever there's zero clicks, and people just end up coming back to you, and then eventually they end up buying from you because they're familiar with your guys' name and brand out there.
I'm going to show you one more thing here. We're going to pivot away from low energy Neil. So Google search CTR and zero click searches 2020. You can see the number of zero click searches. This number is probably higher now, to be honest. 65% went to zero click. 1.59% went to paid CTR, and then organic CTR is 33%, right? So I can see the paid inching up a little more and the organic coming down a little bit and a zero click going up a little more. And so again, like the Charlie Munger quote is, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. And it's very clear what's happening here, right? And so what that means, like when you, from a more practical standpoint, when you're tweeting, when you're writing on X, for example, so I had to tweet, I wrote that the other day, like it's got to be native to that platform. If you're going to write a thread, it's got to be native. If you're going to write on LinkedIn, it's got to be native to the platform. Maybe you're using carousels, right? My point of saying all this is that each platform has its own way of playing the game. If you're playing the game on YouTube, which we might talk about in the next couple episodes, the game that we're playing now is, we got to be really smart about the, not just the headline, but also the thumbnail. And that's how we're going to get a much higher click-through rate. That's how one of our recent videos got like a 7.2% click-through rate. Another one's 5% or so. Whereas when we weren't being intentional about it, our click-through rate was maybe like 1 or 2%. And it's no wonder our videos were sucking, right? It wasn't because we sucked. It's because we weren't playing the game. And so the key thing to understand that the game that's happening on most of these channels, the big ones, is that they are prioritizing creators that are producing zero-click content. That's all it is at the end of the day. All right, so I want to talk about this one thing that can replace all regular social media posting. And I'm going to carry it home. I'm carrying Neil on my back right now because he's very sick. So I'm going to talk about what this is. So
thank you, Eric.
This tool, what's that?
I said thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So this tool is called Castmagic.io. And so what it does, I'm going to share my screen over here actually. I heard about this on Twitter, and those of you that can't see my screen, it's okay. I'm just going to show you what this is all about. So it says, the headline is turn audio into content like magic. So let's say we took this podcast episode, or better yet, it would be like a 30-minute podcast episode that we do. And you can see over here, it'll automatically create a quote or key takeaways into a tweet thread, or it'll make a LinkedIn post, or it'll make the podcast show notes for you. And so there's a lot that can happen here, right? So again, you can see transcription, show notes, summaries, social content. And all we do is we can drop a file, a YouTube link, select the outputs, and your work is done. And we can save 20 plus hours a week. That's a great headline. And it's pretty good. And I guess our mutual friend Noah Kagan uses this. A tool that my team uses, I mentioned in the live show, is Castmagic. It helps make all of our show notes today and timestamps. And man, the people doing our show notes right now, man, I don't know what to say. But here, I'm going to log into this
It's
thing.
going to affect that whole industry for companies charging for show notes.
Yeah. Okay, so check this out. So I uploaded one of our recent episodes that did pretty well on YouTube. And you can see there's a section over here called AI content. And so there's different sections here. You have one for title, so it'll help you create different titles over here. And I can modify them if I want. So I can make them more casual, make them more serious. I can rerun it, right? And then I can copy these if I want. So it'll help you with titles. That's one thing, okay? Second thing is keywords if you want to post them into like your YouTube keyword section. I'm not going to pay too much attention to that one. Introduction if you want to have that. Here's a timestamp overview. And this is where you can have the kind of the show notes. And then discussion questions if you want to talk about this more on like a reaction video to this. Key topics and bullets. And then the cool thing is if you come down a little more, it's going to help you find quotes, hooks, timestamps. Here's like a script for reels if I want to make a reel that's related to long form video. And here's the cool thing with link, it'll make you a LinkedIn post. Okay. So here's a LinkedIn post. Let's say we had a marketing school page for on LinkedIn. It doesn't need to be that serious, right? It can just, this might actually just do, right? We can make it a little better. We can modify a little more, but this at least gets us maybe 60, 70% of the way there. And you might be able to make the argument that you could just post this, right? And so there's that. Here's a newsletter. If we want to have a simple marketing school newsletter, you can just drop this in there. It's, hey guys, we're just going to be an AI generated newsletter with the key takeaways from marketing school. That's all you're going to get. Every single day, you're going to get a newsletter from the summaries of what we talked about. Here's a tweet thread. So basically all I'm saying is that it's done a lot of the work on the social side where it's done a lot of the heavy lifting. And I do think, in fact, this saves at least 20 hours, if not more per week. And I think it only costs like $39 a month for the cheap version. And I think there's and you get 200 hours from it. So what are your reactions to this, Neil, so far?
Look, I think it's great. And the bigger takeaway that most people need when looking at this is there's a lot of AI tools out there that'll help you scale up your content efforts and get you more bang for the buck from all the content that you're already creating. Castmagic is one of those tools out there, but keep testing and trying a lot of them out there because if you're creating content, might as well get more from it. The more content you create, assuming it's good in quality, the more reach you're going to end up getting.
Dude, Neil's so sick that he's not even showing in the frame anymore. But so there's a section called Magic Chat as well. So this is where you can just ask it questions. So I can say, summarize the key bullets from this transcript over here. Write a blog post, right? It didn't do a good job of writing a blog post. ChatGPT is still better than that. But the point is, it will take the transcript and then you can use it like a ChatGPT and just ask it to do stuff from it. And so for $39 a month, I think this is a steal. Show notes, people. Pay attention. Let us know what you think about this. All right. So we're going to talk about the right way to get better at marketing ASAP. And so I'll kick it off first. I look at it this way. I think you can do all the learning in the world. You can talk to all the people. You can read. You can listen to all the podcasts. You can do all these things. And don't get me wrong. I love doing all those much more than any, like the biggest learners out there. But at the end of the day, when it comes to marketing, if you're not out there experimenting, you're just not going to learn, right? That's just all it is. Like you can only be a professional student for that long. Like for example, I have this book over here called Scaling People. This one's wrapped, but I bought a bunch of these. I bought 100 of these for the upcoming event for people. And this book is about literally scaling people and building a great people organization. I can read all this, but if we don't implement, then we're not going to get that far. And so what we're doing with this book, because it's like a tomb, for example, we are picking the issues that are most pertinent to us as an organization, and we're reading it as a people team, right? And then from there, what we're doing is we're slowly implementing each thing and we're stopping the reading. And so what I would recommend is as you learn these things, quickly go out there and implement, because what tends to happen is a lot of us start to become professional students and we read these tweet threads, we react to them, and we feel good about ourselves. It feels like a dopamine hit. But at the end of the day, it just doesn't matter. And so I would say you got to go out there, you got to experiment, look at the numbers, iterate on them. And then I would say my biggest hack in terms of going out there to learn from other people is actually talking to other people. Who else is an expert in the space? The reason I like doing my masterminds is I like bringing some of the best people together, and I like learning from them, figuring out what's actually working behind the scenes. Because usually with these people, the top performers, they're only sharing the top 5% of the stuff in person or on the phone with other people. They're not going to share it in the podcast, because once they share it publicly, it's going to get shared and then everyone's going to start doing it. So that would be one of my biggest hacks. And Neil does a good job of this, actually. He'll actually just straight up call someone. It doesn't matter. If he feels like he has a question, he's just going to pick up the phone and call. He will not wait for an email. He's not going to schedule a call with you. He's just going to call you.
Tools can also make it a lot easier to experiment and learn. For example, in our last episode, we discussed a tool that can help you with social media. If you haven't listened to the episode, make sure you check it out. But there's a lot of tools out there that can help experimentation and that can help you figure out what to do in marketing to get the best ROI. In addition to that, what I've always found is some of the best marketing tactics that I've learned and that's helped me improve as a marketer have been from really old companies. So for example, Nike, one of the ways they made the Jordan shoes really popular is they integrated a lot of color when it wasn't allowed, and they paid for the penalties, right? Those are really unique strategy that helped not just make the Jordan shoes stand out, but that also helped them generate quite a bit more revenue and created a ton of buzz, and the fees were definitely worth it. But there's a lot of old companies, and even though the marketing platforms have changed, the lessons and strategies that you can take from some of these older brands are still applicable today. So why not just test them out and leverage them as well?
That's the key word again. It's test. And so what Neil's talking about too is sometimes what's old becomes new again. So direct mail, for example, or people using billboards, right? OT is like people running TV ads again, right? And that's what it is at the end of the day. It's not
Dude,
just
look at Manscaped. Manscaped grew so much from TV ads, although I don't really have cable TV. But either way, they grew a crap ton just through traditional TV ads.
Yep. Look, that's all it is. I would say if you're gonna learn, experiment, have an experimental budget. You don't have to go, especially if you're running ads on like a Facebook or Instagram or whatever. You don't necessarily have to have a large budget to go with. Look at the data, iterate very quickly, talk to a lot of people. And I can't emphasize that one enough. What I've noticed from talking to billionaires is that the main difference with them is their cycle for communication is like 10x faster than other people. They're just going to pick up the phone and call, and they're going to ask. And I'll flip it to the other side and we can work towards wrapping up here. But we talk a lot about, or I talk a lot, I bring up Mr. Beast a lot too. This is a guy that I remember watching a video. He would reach out to people that are experts, business experts, and say, hey, look, I don't know anything about business. Can you just teach me? And I'll teach you as much as I can. I'll give you as much value as I can. So that's the way to do it. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone. Don't be afraid to dial, ask questions, and you're going to be able to move a lot faster than other people. We're going to talk about why the best way nowadays to do paid media is to actually not do paid media. So Neil and I want to preface this by saying that the old days of doing paid media, it was all about how you structured your campaigns. It was a lot about the phrase matching, exact matching. A lot of that stuff has been taken away now. And a lot of it was really based on how deep someone understood the platform. And that was a paradigm from before, right? But I don't know if you agree with this, but I do believe the paradigm is shifting now, where the machines are getting better and better. And we can talk about also what we're seeing from experience in our own respective ad agencies too. Because the old way is, yeah, you're supposed to be optimizing a lot. You're supposed to be making changes, monitoring the accounts very closely. But now, because the AIs have gotten a lot better, it's shifting a little bit.
We still see, if you just let them do whatever they want to end up doing, you don't generate as high of a ROI versus human intervention. But we think this has been consistent for well over a few years now. The highest leverage point in paid advertising isn't actually focusing on paid advertising. It's related to the creative, the messaging, the copy, the landing pages, the ad that you're using and how appealing it is. How congruent is the messaging? Because if you just dupe people to getting the click and then the landing page doesn't deliver, the product doesn't deliver, you're not going to see the conversions. Or if you see the conversions and then you dupe people, you're going to get tons of bad reviews and refunds as well. So what we're seeing is the highest leverage point isn't actually the ad itself. It is, or let me rephrase that. The highest leverage point isn't the fine tuning of the campaign settings. It's typically all the other elements surrounding it. And that's where a lot of businesses and marketers aren't focusing on. They're focusing on like, oh, I'm going to tweak this knob here in this campaign setting, and it's going to give me a huge increase. Not really. Over time, everyone ends up learning all those tricks. It's all about the other stuff that you're not really doing on the ad platform itself. And that's how you make paid advertising effective.
It's interesting because tweaking the knobs, optimizing, you start to get diminishing returns at some point. Same thing with CRO, you start to get diminishing returns at some point. But with creative, it's actually more of it's like a feast or famine type of thing. Your creative's either really good or it sucks, right? It's just straight up.
Yep.
That's just how it is. And so what I would say is you're still tweaking the knobs a little bit, but there's less knob tweaking today. And the way to do paid media moving forward is, yes, there still needs to be some active monitoring of the accounts just to make sure the machines don't go crazy. But we've been saying this on this podcast, the creative is the X factor. And you know what's interesting, Neil? Back in the day, let's say 10 plus years ago, when Google had its quality score, that's really what it was trying to say at the end of the day. It's how good is your ad copy? How good is your creative? How good is your landing page? That's what factors into a quality score. And they've been trying to say this for the longest time, but it wasn't until maybe in the last couple of years where a lot of D2C marketers started to understand that, oh, it's just a creative, and really being able to have your data on lockdown, hopefully you have your attribution on lockdown, and then you're able to really unleash what it is that you want to accomplish.
Dude, totally. So right now, if you want to do really well with paid advertising, don't spend all the time in the day learning about all the knobs and the tweaks and how the campaign settings and platforms work. Yes, you do need to know that, and you need to know it well, but you should be spending more time on the stuff that's not within the ad management platform, such as your landing pages, the copy, the videos, the creative that you're using to appeal to people to get them to click over to your website, surveying potential customers and existing customers to figure out what would delight them so you can adjust your messaging or your layouts, doing eye tracking studies or using tools like Crazy Egg to figure out, all right, where people are getting stuck on the landing page. All these are the type of things that's really going to help you fine tune your paid advertising. And it's the stuff that most people who manage a lot of money on paid ads, funny enough, the bigger they manage, the more we see them neglecting the things I just talked about.
I think this is an episode, those of you that have people on your paid media team, whether you're an agency or your brand side, send this over to whoever's handling paid media to really help put them on notice that, hey, it is important to understand how things work within the platforms, but it's time to start to understand how to optimize your creative and how to be creative. And if you don't know how, there's a lot of free information that's out there, whether it's on YouTube. There's a lot of creative people out there. Go look at what the Harmon brothers have done. Chamber Media is another interesting one too. Harmon brothers, FYI for everyone, they made the unicorn pooping rainbow ice cream for the Squatty Potty. And that initially the Squatty Potty team said no to it. They said, no, we're not going to spend a couple $1 million on this ad. And even Lori Grenier, one of the sharks that invested, said, no, let's not do that. That's too expensive. Doesn't make sense. A couple months later, one of the founders of Squatty Potty was actually at a conference and they saw a unicorn. And at the moment, they're like, oh, you know what? Let's try the unicorn thing. So they spent a couple $1 million, and that ad still continues to run to this day and has generated multiple 8 figures. And I think at the high point, Squatty Potty was maybe doing $20 million a year or so. And I think they ended up selling. But point is, they were really just chugging along until that creative came out, and boom, it exploded everywhere. Because once a creative is really good, people like to share it as well. And so you get the additional benefit, you get the additional engagement. So keep that in mind. Neil and I'll speak for myself. I wouldn't say like we're necessarily the best creatives in the world, but we understand how important it is. So if you can't do it, go find someone that can, ideally, or at least go learn it if you can't afford it. Neil?
And also test a lot of variations too, because even if you think you know what's going to work, it doesn't always end up working that way. Just like the Squatty Potty example that Eric gave, most people don't really see things as, oh, if I have a pooping unicorn rainbow that poops ice cream with sprinkles, it'll sell a ton of these Squatty Potties.
Oh yeah, the sprinkles, nice.
Yeah, but when you think about that, it's just those ideas are so off the wall. They're a big hit or miss. And for as many hits there's many more misses. So a lot of this stuff you have to do tests and you have to be patient as well.
I think the best analogy of it is those types of ads are home runs. A lot more of the times you're probably going to have to go for singles. So go for the home runs every now and then, the grand slams every now and then, but just understand that it's high risk, high reward in some situations like that. So yep. I love the Harmon brothers. I love Chamber Media. I think they do something similar as well. I don't know if there's any other creative places. We're going to talk about how we're starting to hit quote unquote record numbers on our YouTube channel. So just for some context, right now for marketing school, we have a very small channel, about 7,000 subs or so, but it's starting to grow. And Neil, you probably don't look at your YouTube studios much, but maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was obsessed with looking at YouTube Studio. And this is back when I had the office in downtown LA. We're recording all the time, and we had videos that would get 300,000 views or so. So my YouTube was cranking. And I remember there's a certain point in time when I look at the metrics where the growth rate started to accelerate, whether it's the number of views accelerating and the number of subscribers accelerating. So you can say maybe it's growing 20% month over month. And I've seen it consistently accelerate at that rate a couple years ago. Now I'm seeing it again. And point is, the law of compounding, if you're continuing to accelerate at 20% month over month, the numbers are going to start to get big. And so that's why I was talking to a YouTube consultant, and I was looking at both my channels, Leveling Up, which has 75,000 subs, and the marketing school one. I'm like, the marketing school one has way more potential. I think it's just going to outpace it by a lot. And so I think the point is, a lot of times, one of the points here I would say, and I'll turn it over to Neil, is when you're starting out, the natural human inclination is to compare the number of subs or views that you have to someone that's maybe in their chapter 15 or year 15. And it starts to get really overwhelming to do that. But as long as you're competing against yourself and you're seeing the law of numbers, you're seeing the law of compounding happen, then you know you're on the right track. And the YouTube consultant, he was like, yeah, I agree with you. There's a lot more potential with marketing school. So go ahead, Neil.
Yeah. So what are the numbers that we're seeing that's record numbers, and what are we doing to achieve it?
Yep. So we're growing. The numbers that would be 20% month over month on views and subscribers, right? And then right now we're at about 7,000 subscribers. And I'm looking at it right now. Let me see what else I can pull up. Watch time is compounding as well. That's about 20% month over month as well. And I'm looking at some of these graphs. Yeah, it's just going up and to the right. So what are we doing was your other question, correct?
Yeah, so I know a few of the things that we're doing. Number one, we're making our videos longer. So by making our videos longer, it helps with retention. Number two, we're starting to talk less about regurgitated content. If you look at a lot of our topics in the past, it'll be like 7 SEO trends for 2023 that you have to follow, or 7 SEO hacks to check out. And we're talking about stuff that's different. Marketers are using this shady LinkedIn hack to get crazy growth. And then we're breaking down what marketers are doing and what you can learn from it. And we don't recommend the tactic, but we're talking about videos like that. Or we'll talk about stuff that's trending, such as like why Elon Musk is funding legal bills to people and how that's really interesting for Twitter and can also help cause them to get more growth in the future. But in essence, we're talking about stuff that's fresh, up and coming, and hasn't been regurgitated a lot, as well as making sure that there's longer form videos. And Eric and I are trying to provide more nuggets and insights within each video to also keep people hooked longer versus just dragging it out for the sake of dragging it out. And then, of course, people get bored and drop off.
So I'm looking at the graph right now. So I'm looking at a 90-day comparison. So watch time is up 264%. And then the number of subscribers in the last 90 days or so, we are up about, looks like 30-ish, 40-ish% or so. And then I would just say that if you look at the number of subscribers on a yearly annual basis, we're up 1,500% or so. So point being, it's starting to compound.
The other thing that we've done, and Eric is the one who drives this most of the time, actually almost all the time, is we start sharing screens. So if you're creating content around an educational based topic that requires execution and implementation, sharing screens to break down stats or steps or trends or anything that can help people not just understand what information you're giving, but also better know how to execute based on what you just showed them, that's a big win. And I do believe that if you can end up doing that, you're going to be in a much better spot. And we've seen when we do that in our videos, it also helps us generate quite a bit more views as well.
Yeah. So I'll share a couple things that, Neil, you're probably not even aware of this, but we actually have a quote unquote brand team that helps with the thumbnails. And so what happens inside of Slack is for each video now, we will have 3 thumbnails and we'll pick the one to go with first, and we'll also pick titles. So we're switching the thumbnails and we're switching the headlines if they're not working. I don't think we're switching quickly enough. I think it needs to happen like within the first hour, but unfortunately a lot of the brand team, they're based in the Philippines. And then also the other thing is with these videos now, Neil, you're actually looking at the spreadsheet right now. I added a column for thumbnail concept in column H. And so I will come up with a thumbnail idea here. So at least we'll have another idea, because before we were just handing it off. But now I'm trying to be a lot more intentional with the thumbnail and also the idea itself. And whenever we have an idea, it usually will perform, let's say 10 to 20x better. And keep in mind, this is the law of numbers. We don't have a lot of views per video yet. But I would just say at the end of the day, your idea needs to be really good. Your thumbnail needs to be really good, and you need to hook them. So before I used to say, welcome to marketing school, blah, blah, blah. And then we have a big thing in the beginning. Now we just go straight into it in a YouTube video just so we have better retention. And our videos that have good retention could really be anywhere from 40 to 60%. We're not Mr. Beast. 40 to 60% is actually pretty good for a YouTube video.
Cool. Make sure you rate, review this podcast. That's it for today. Please give us 5-star reviews and ratings. That helps us a lot. Thank you very much.